Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Healthcare deals were in the news this week with the announcement that LCMC Health is buying 3 Tulane hospitals, and amidst a nursing shortage, Loyola and Ochsner are opening a training simulation center. There are new figures on how declining urban populations are affecting school systems, and speaking of numbers, we'll hear the city's plans for spending federal COVID relief funding. We'll learn where the funding for the mayoral recall campaign is coming from. All of this, plus a look at the status of carnival parade routes, are in the lineup for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Matt Sledge, staff writer for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Rich Collins, associate news editor, Biz New Orleans Magazine. And Rich, we're going to stick with you to get an idea of what has gone on with a really big hospital merger in town, LCMC and Tulane.
Right, that was big medical news this week because LCMC Health and Tulane announced their plan to partner so that LCMC Health will buy the 3 Tulane-affiliated hospitals that are currently owned by HCA, which is this for-profit national, behemoth. So with this plan, LCMC is going to pay $150 million. They will acquire the hospitals, and the thought right now is that the downtown Tulane Hospital, which is Tulane Medical Center, that's going to become part of the school. The services that are available at Tulane Medical Center are going to go to UMC downtown, and then out to EJ, which is also LCMC Health, part of their network. Tulane is going to invest in that building and then also in charity. They've got a plan to invest, I think it's $600 million in their infrastructure downtown as part of the healthcare education infrastructure they're building downtown. Meanwhile, for LCMC, this really means now we've got two major healthcare systems in this market, and that's not a surprise to anybody that the consolidation happened. But I did talk to a healthcare economist yesterday who was a little surprised about who the players are, because a few years ago, it seemed like HCA might have been the other one, along with Ochsner. HCA had tried to buy EJ and WestJet a few years ago, but they couldn't get the deals together. So if those deals had gone a different way, some people who observe all this say this could be a totally different scenario right now. But instead, you have LCMC, which didn't exist 15 years ago.
Right.
Like if we were talking about our high schoolers, you've got high schoolers that are older than this health system. And it was Children's Hospital. They merged with, Toro. And they've acquired, New Orleans East Hospital, WestJet, EJ, and UMC. And now with this, they are going to be, for a moment at least, a 9-facility health system.
How much bigger still is Ochsner?
Well, so I did ask somebody this question. Locally, this puts LCMC, in fighting weight of Ochsner, but Ochsner has 47 facilities now. It's grown over the same 15, or since Katrina. There's 47 around the Gulf South now. It's huge. I mean, Ochsner is the biggest employer in the state, private employer in the state of Louisiana, more than 30,000 employees. So they're still not comparable in size that way. But locally.
Okay, in terms of doctors, Tulane, of course, has a medical school.
Right.
It has doctors that have been practicing there at the Tulane Hospital.
Right.
What's going to happen with staff?
Well, I did talk a little bit to some folks that have worked for HCA for years, because HCA owned Tulane Medical Center for 25 years. So there are questions about what happens, hey, with our, my benefits and all these kind of things. It's changing over. Right now, LCMC has said in the initial release there, no one's losing any jobs. So that's, the plan is to keep everybody. But we know that services are going to be moving from LCMC just down the street to UMC and then out to EJ. So there's going to be changes for sure, the layout of that downtown health infrastructure is going to look different in a few years. But I will say this, one thing about the consolidation, I talked to someone yesterday, the reason it's inevitable is because the health systems, they're facing higher costs. So when you consolidate, you get the benefit of the economies of scale. But what's most important, apparently, to all these guys is negotiating power with the insurance companies. So a 9-hospital LCMC Health can negotiate a better rate with Blue Cross or whoever, more so than the current size. And so that's the big reason they do it. Of course, the verdict's out on whether that's good for consumers because if the insurance companies are paying more, then what happens with premiums?
Right.
I remember a few years ago talking to a guy. He was a fundraiser for nonprofits. That was his job. And he was drooling over Children's Hospital.
Right.
Back when it was just Children's Hospital.
Right.
He said that is by far the best fundraising operation. People want to give money to something called Children's Hospital.
Right.
And you can see where they've gone and where they've built from that now.
Well, it's interesting because it was a small one hospital, but it had a lot of, it was a wealthy hospital. And so the one economist I talked to yesterday said, this deal is exciting, but there are some risks. And one is that, as LCMC grows, can it keep up organizationally and financially with this sprawling, bigger footprint?
So we'll definitely wait and see how that happens. But once again, I'm going to go back to the staff and teaching because Tulane Medical School, it furnishes us doctors, as does LSU Medical School.
Right.
They will be just going to the same facilities again. They won't have the Tulane Hospital to work
Right.
at, but they'll be going to LCMC and the other to UMC and the other hospitals.
Yeah, it must be. And I was even saying this, for the consumer, how do you choose? Well, I'm going to go to EJ today, or I'm going to go to an Ochsner facility. You don't. It's really you go where your doctor is affiliated, and so the Tulane is still going to be UMC will be full of Tulane doctors, and then there will be more out at EJ
and they already work there anyway, so it's just okay.
Right.
All righty, thanks a lot.
But it seems like the
It's
pattern
really-
in New Orleans over the last few decades about the two biggest hospitals in New Orleans, it's always Ochsner and somebody else. And somebody else kind of changes, but Ochsner's there and gives them ground.
Right.
Ochsner is there in a big way, but this is an exciting thing to happen for our community.
big. And we should note that Ochsner has a big change because Warner Thomas, who's been the face of the
Right.
operation, is leaving very soon, and Pete November is taking over in November.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rich. Okay, Matt, over to you. The city of New Orleans is looking at some money coming in. Some of it has come in and some of it has been spent. This is from the Pandemic Relief Fund, federal dollars, but there's a lot of it still.
Yeah, so you may remember the federal government has passed a series of bills since the pandemic started, and last year they passed the American Rescue Plan Act. New Orleans got about $390 million from that act. We've spent already almost the entire first half of it, kind of plugging holes in the budget from 2020 and 2021. No one was coming here on vacation, so we weren't getting those tourism dollars. The economy is starting to come back, and now we have another pot of money, about $190 million, to go toward kind of lingering pandemic relief issues or to a wide variety of causes. President Biden has suggested that cities spend this money on policing, for example, and that is one of the big plans that Mayor Cantrell indeed does have.
And that there's a lot of money there. And for policing, let's take a look at policing, because one of the suggestions, the proposals that she has on the table now, so big pay raises for police officers and also an enticement for others to come in, like a $30,000 signing bonus. Well, everybody wants to see pay raises for our officers, but can it sustain? Because what she has on the table is just for 3 years, and she, by the way, leaves office after 3 years, so it was planned.
It's an overall pay and benefit package of $75 million for the police. Yesterday, her top deputy told me that they're also looking at extra benefits for fire and EMS. That would cost $15 million. So it's a lot of money. The goal is to stop the bleeding at NOPD. They've had a real problem with retention over there. That's happening at the same time that the city is grappling with this huge crime problem. But indeed, already some people are asking, okay, if we throw money at the police department right now, A, does that solve the retention and recruiting problem? And B, can we sustain it after 3 years?
Yeah, but somebody would have to pay for that. There would be, a big addition to the budget. Now, some of the other areas that she'd like to see funding are?
It's very broad buckets. She's held a couple of town halls over the last couple weeks, and it's in very, very general categories. Aside from this kind of public safety spending, she hasn't given us any specific line items. It would include things like upgrading computers and equipment at City Hall, spending money on housing, which is a big concern for activists right now, and then some other very broad general areas,
More
like
on roads?
homeless services and youth services.
Right. So this needs to go, it'll have to go before council, right?
Yes.
And is there going to be any public input?
Yeah,
Aside from council, will there
so
be
the
any
mayor held
meetings?
these town halls. It was interesting. She didn't do a whole lot of of a public input process beforehand. And at these town halls, she suggested that the council meetings, which will probably take place next month, will be another opportunity for people to weigh in and offer their thoughts.
Okay. So what's the feedback so far from council? What are their concerns?
You know, it's been interesting because I think the council is on board with the mayor that something needs to be done about NOPD. They're just as concerned about the mayor as the mayor about the size of NOPD. But they have voiced a little bit of skepticism about this police pay package, about whether simply throwing money at the problem is going to solve it and whether it's sustainable. So it's hard to tell right now exactly how things are going to shake out, but there could be a little bit of pushback there on the size of the package.
And this has to be decided, what, by the end of the year or sometime in December for next year's budget?
Well, with the federal pandemic relief money, I don't think there's as firm of a deadline.
Okay.
The mayor's office has said they want to get this money moving out the door as fast as possible. Obviously, it's intended to help relieve the economy, and you don't want to wait 2 or 3 years to do that. For the traditional budget, next year's traditional budget, the council does have to come to a decision by December 1st, and all indications are that these discussions are going to be happening in parallel at the same time, so it's going to be a really busy November.
All right.
Supposedly,
Thanks, Matt.
the problem of the lack of police isn't the lack of funding. That there is money there to fill some positions. The people aren't there who want to fill them, you know. So
yeah, I mean, there's this.
That's a nationwide issue.
I think there's a genuine question here, and you'll hear it even from police officers sometimes. You saw it in their exit interviews. A lot of officers say, "No, pay isn't my main problem. You know, I don't like the way the department is run. I don't like the way internal affairs handles complaints. All of that." On the other hand, you throw $30,000 at people, and it starts to change
For
their
signing
tune.
bonuses, yeah.
Well, maybe.
All right.
I
All
had a
right.
question for you about
Yeah.
the budget. A while back, I'd heard a tourism official say they'd hoped that the mayor would spend some of the money on the French Quarter and the infrastructure needs because it's the golden goose, right? It's what all the tourism's built around.
Yeah.
And they feel like it hasn't had a real facelift in a
Yeah.
couple decades. Is there any talk about
But
that?
one big project the city does hope to spend money on is on blight remediation, anti-dumping projects. So you could imagine some of that going toward the French
There
Quarter.
definitely is not a shortage of issues to which the money can go, and we have to move on. Let's go over to Dawn right now. Urban populations are dropping, and that means school enrollment is dropping too.
Well, and in New Orleans or Louisiana, it's a double whammy because it's not just population dropping. It's storms moving people out. We've had population declines since Katrina. We were coming back up, and in 2021, we were the 5th highest population loss state. If I said that in a way that makes sense for people, we were 5th highest of population loss in the whole country. And besides having the smaller population, the population that does live here is choosing to have fewer and fewer babies or unsuccessfully having babies, not sure what's happening. But in 2020, we had 700 fewer babies than in 2015. That's a 14% loss. And as those babies move up, the ones who were born in 2015, they're now first graders. So they're missing seats in classrooms, and schools are funded by how many children they have in class. We're at about 83% in New Orleans right now. There will be an accurate count that comes out later this month, but about 83% of available seats are filled in the school district. So the funding starts to disappear.
Right.
If you have funding for 100% and you only fill 83%, that 17% goes away. And the costs that don't go away are your building and your electric and your food and your water. Some of that, you know, there are fixed costs that they can't change. So the things that you lose are the things that attract children to those schools in the first place: the arts, the sports, the cultural opportunities that the schools can no longer afford because they're not properly funded. So, and it's not just New Orleans, it's statewide. Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany, St. Bernard, St. Charles, Caddo. Overall, the state is down in population and down in birth rates. It's 14% in Orleans Parish, 15% in Jefferson, 8% in St. Tammany, 14% statewide. And as they try to figure out how to get to the bottom of it, they'll have to figure out the funding for those schools. And some people say, well, have all those people chosen public school, you know, private school over public school? The answer is private school enrollment is down too. It really is a matter of population and birth rate. It's not just a school choice kind of issue.
And so this is something that they see affecting them in the long term.
Correct, because as that small shrinking kindergarten moves, that's the small class going all the way up, all 12 grades after kindergarten. So smaller resources for the school as a whole. And it's not just a New Orleans problem. It's happening in districts like Austin, Atlanta, Nashville, Denver. You know, somebody said before the show that they heard recently that we may not, as a population, be a sustainable population anymore. Instead of overpopulating, we're now underpopulating. I haven't done that research yet. I think it was in the green room before we were here that we were talking about it. But it's a problem that will need to be fixed, and I don't know how you encourage people to have more children, but they might need to. I'm personally tapped out.
And you've done well, Don.
You know, my husband and I replaced ourselves and added one more, but that's all we can do.
All right, Don, thanks a lot. E, we're going to go over to you now. Carnival routes.
Well, this time last year, the Carnival crews were wondering if they'd be able to parade because the year before they weren't because of COVID, and there was speculation that there was a problem with the number of police. Finally, the announcement came out, yeah, y'all can parade. We've got to really cut down on the routes. And so what we had last year was Carnival parade routes that were cut back. So they've been waiting for some kind of word. Earlier in the year, the mayor said something about, well, we may not have Mardi Gras parades, and of course that caused an uproar, and she backtracked on that. Yeah. So we're going to have parades. We just don't know about the routes yet. So yesterday they announced pretty much that there will be parades, and the parades will be pretty much the routes from last year, which are cut back routes. Now there are some little details that are going to be announced Tuesday, but there's going to be shorter parade routes. But the thing is, if anybody wants to see a parade, there's a place where they can go and see a parade. And you know, the first week or so, the routes are not like that overcrowded. I mean, it's fun to do. You can just go. I mean, for Endymion and Bacchus, it's a different thing. But the problem is the same we're talking about. The police chief says there's just not the police manpower out there. And if then, you know, this isn't permanent, we hope to come back and do better next year. But, you know, the thing I wonder about is, one, if they can get that manpower back or person power back in the year, because there's no sign. I mean, look what we're hearing here about population declines. I don't know what's going to happen that's going to increase the number of police dramatically within a year. And we're not just talking about parades, we're just talking about doing regular police work. But the other issue is when people join crews, you know, they're paying money to ride in the parades. We have this very unique system in Mardi Gras where there's no sponsors, where the event is paid for by the participants, which is really nice and very wholesome. But the fact is, if the participants aren't feeling fulfilled by being on the ride, then is there going to be a drop-off on those people?
How much shorter are the routes now?
Well, I can tell you, Endymion, I mean, it varies. Endymion's had a 5-mile route. It's going to be a 4-mile route this year. And a lot of them are moved closer to St. Charles Avenue now, and it depends. One that always suffers is the crew of Toth, which had this route that would kind of wind
Pass by Children's Hospital.
Yeah, by all the institutions and all of that. And people love that, but it just can't do that.
So no Toth uptown again this year, huh?
No, and then Endymion's not going to pass in front of Geyer Hall. And so there's some changes, all right? And some of them are convenient. We'll know the full thing later in the week, but you just hope that what the chief says is true, because it's more than just being nostalgic about Mardi Gras. If you don't get them back to the original route, it might hurt the whole thing in the long run.
All right, E, thanks a lot. Matt, we're going to go back over to you. And who's paying for the recall effort for Mayor Cantrell's recall?
Right. This week, we got the first campaign disclosure from Team Recall, the official committee. They said they had raised about $63,000. If you'll remember, they officially started this petition drive at the end of August, so they had about a month to start shaking the can. And of that $63,000, about half came from 2 large donors who have given a lot of money to national Republicans, and the other half came from small donors who gave less than $100 on average, and there were more than 600 of those small donors.
Of course, the Cantrell camp is saying, see, it's Republican-backed.
Right, and that's been their line from the start, that this is all a Republican plot to take out a Democratic mayor and an overwhelmingly Democratic city who was overwhelmingly elected last year.
Didn't those donors, though, also donate to her first campaign?
That's a very good point. Both of them have given to Mayor Cantrell in the past, and one of them, Boise Bollinger, whose name you may recognize from the Bollinger shipyards,
Right,
in fact gave the mayor $5,000 as recently as last year.
Okay, so he has contributed to both Democrats and Republicans,
Yes.
not just solely Republicans. But we're seeing here, what did you say, 600 or so small donations? And how much money have they raised? About $63,000?
So it's about $63,000 in total, which interestingly is about as much money as the mayor reported having in her campaign account at the end of last year.
But also interesting, how many signatures? That's what really counts ultimately.
Right, and the organizers have been a little vague about how many they've raised. They said at the 1 month mark that they had 10,000-ish. They didn't give an exact number. They need $53,000. So if they were able to continue
signatures.
yeah, excuse me,
Yeah.
yeah, 53,000 signatures. If they were able to continue at the same rate as they had during the first month, they would be on their way to getting that recall election on the ballot. However, usually with these kind of things, you sign up your most enthusiastic people at the start, the people who are really rip-roaring to go, and then you start seeing diminishing returns.
And plus,
an
the
uphill
workers
climb.
start getting worn out too.
Yeah, it's an all-volunteer effort still at this point. They haven't hired paid canvassers.
And of course, all these signatures have to be validated, so it's a big process.
Yeah.
And they've got till Ash Wednesday to
Yeah.
collect these. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Matt. Rich, over to you. We need nurses. We've just talked about, the growing empire of LCMC here, and the already grown one of Ochsner, but they have to staff these hospitals
Right.
with medical personnel, including nurses, and there's just such a big nursing shortage. So what's being done to help that here?
Well, I'm laughing because we need cops, we need
need
students, and we
children.
need nurses. Where is everybody right now? I don't know where everyone's going. But yeah, so right, the context for this story is that we're experts say we're going to be short 1 million to 2 million nurses by 2030, and that's because as baby boomers age, the demand's going to rise, and the average age of a nurse in America today is 50 years old. So there's a lot of efforts being made and with the health systems and with the schools and with the two together to speed up that pipeline. So one was really interesting. I got to tour this new nursing simulation lab at Loyola just a couple days ago. It opened in early October. And they took, in Monroe Hall, they took some classrooms that were being used for other
So
purposes.
on the main campus of Loyola.
Right there, yeah. And it's funny because I walked in through a classroom hallway, and then you go through this hospital type door, and then you're in a hospital setting. And I swear, I forgot that I was on a campus, and I thought that I was in a medical setting because it looks like a hospital. Every room's got all the technical stuff that you have in hospitals. That I don't know what all it does, but it's basically they built a hospital, and what this is full of instead of patients, you've got these high-tech robot mannequins lying in the beds, and these are to allow the students, the nursing students in particular right now, to practice all these procedures, taking vitals and things like that, or practicing tracheotomy type things. But it's pretty wild. They've got a sleeve you can pull on that's heavily reinforced so that people can practice drawing blood. But the most intense is the wearable abdomen that you strap on. Anyone can strap it on, and it simulates a birth. It's got a little robot baby.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
It's great.
And Ochsner is working with them on this.
Yeah, so this is a $2 million or almost $2 million project. Ochsner and Loyola are partners because Ochsner is partners with Loyola and some other learning institutions to increase that pipeline. Ochsner has a bunch of programs with Loyola that allow students to come and learn at Ochsner, but more importantly, they're actually subsidizing the cost of the education in exchange for work commitments.
Really needed, definitely needed. I know Ochsner also has been working with some high school programs too, I believe. I know through the Orleans Parish, they have the Career Center,
Right.
and it really does start in high school to a great degree of acquainting students with the medical profession, and maybe direct them toward a nursing profession.
Right, I saw an Ochsner program and some others all trying to catch kids as early as freshmen in high school to get them in that pathway.
And go ahead, Eddie.
And a real reflection of the concern about nursing is that building that Delgado just built on City Park Avenue.
here.
I think it's like about a 5-story building. And this shows, now it had been in the old charity hospital, But this shows a real commitment. Let's get some nurses.
Right, that's
and
an
Ochsner
imposing
has that
structure.
Chamberlain nursing program
Chamberlain too, right out in Metairie.
Right, and certainly Delgado has been prominent in the nursing field for generations here, and their addition now in this main campus is really pretty impressive. So obviously this community is putting a lot of effort and money into trying to increase the number of nurses in our area.
Right.
E, did you have something? Did I hear you pipe up? No, huh? Okay.
I did ask. I was wondering if there was going to be a glut of nurses if we go over. And she said there's no possibility of overcorrecting right now. It's the short.
No,
they need so many that you can't make too many.
And nursing is really, I mean, it's such a rewarding field, and it's
Right.
such a necessary field.
Right.
And we're so grateful to our nurses, but it's also a pretty good paying field now too. And so many different opportunities. Aside from just working at a hospital, a lot of nurses now are traveling. We saw a lot of that during the pandemic. So it's a pretty wide open field, a lot of opportunities there. All righty, time for other stories. E, let us
Well, some
start
kind
with-
of sad. The man named Norman Mormillion Jr., who was a preservationist who operated the Laura Plantation in Vassary on St. James. It was a real work of love for him. He did a lot to try to preserve the culture and to learn about the people who live there, both the people who live there and the enslaved people, and about their culture. Anyway, he died during the week. He was hit by a vehicle out for a walk, and so he's a big loss to that community and to preserving the history of that area.
That really is a very, very sad and tragic loss. Matt, over to you.
Well, there's kind of a developing tiff between City Council President Helena Moreno and Sheriff Susan Hudson. Moreno's top security guard has been pulled from her staff. So I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop on that to see if we learn anything more about the reasons for that.
All righty, Don.
Big game Sunday in the Superdome as Joe Burrow returns for the first time since he won the championship for the LSU Tigers to face off against the Saints.
Really
So,
big. Definitely a big game. It would be interesting to see, how many positions does Taysom Hill play in this game,
yeah, I think he just put him on the field by himself.
Right.
really.
I mean, I thought it was interesting, the story in Jefferson Parish where Cynthia Lee Shang has a plan to rethink the playground system out there.
Right.
And there was a big uproar. And then there was a story in the paper about how she's going to shelve the plan, but she says, no, I'm not shelving the plan. We're going full speed ahead. We're just going to get lots of input this time. I saw her at an event yesterday. I thought she did a great job sort of taking the criticism from the community and then pivoting.
Okay, we'll see where it goes. So she is not shelving the plan. They
She's
still
not shelving
plan
the
to do
plan.
something, but they don't know exactly
Well,
what.
they
yet, is it?
want to reapply those resources. There's 27 playgrounds to better serve the community, and they're just going to help make sure they get lots of
Okay,
feedback.
we'll be looking at that. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here around the table. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.